A few days ago, I was hanging out with my friends, and seeing as my wife has 10 different boyfriends at the time, I was gonna go on a two-man. And there's this one girl, she was fine looking. You know, I'm talking about the type of girls you only see in movies, the type of girls you only see in TV shows, or they're famous singers. She was one of one. And I go up to her, and my homie steps in front of me and says, "Hey yo, nigga, did you take your gonorrhea medicine?" And I was hoping she didn't hear that, so I kept going up to her, and then my other homie came out of nowhere and fucking tripped me. And then while I was on the ground, they pantsed me, showing my bare fucking ass. One of my homies came out of nowhere, said, "Ew, he didn't wipe." They kicked me in the gut, and then they all ran a train on the girl I was trying to get with. After that, I had to dab up my homies because that's some great fucking defense, my nigga. And that gave me an idea. What if I made a list of the top 10 defensive seasons in NFL history? And that's what we're going to be discussing in this video, and let's get into it. Whoa, 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 whoa! If you don't want to be caught with Jeffree Star like Stephon Diggs, like, comment, subscribe, and let's get into this video. Now, before we really start here, you might have watched my offensive video. It's a very good video. You should go watch it right here. And you might have heard me say that playoff success is more important than regular season success. That's a little bit different with defensive players, of course, because it's way easier on offense when you play a skill position to be unstoppable in the playoffs compared to playing it on defense. They can just scheme around you. It just makes it harder to dominate overall if you're the best defensive player in the world, the best defensive player on your team, to dominate in the playoffs because you're their number one look. They're scheming to block you, they're scheming not to throw the ball your way, or they're not going to throw it over the middle because you're a linebacker. Now, with that being said, let's get into the video now. Number 10, 2004 Ed Reed. This year, Ed Reed was first team All-Pro. He was Defensive Player of the Year, and I believe he was the last safety to win the Defensive Player of the Year award. He's the second greatest safety of all time. Yes, after Ronnie Lott. And in this season, he played 16 games, had 9 interceptions, had 358 defensive return yards, which is an NFL record, had a defensive touchdown of 106 yards, had 3 forced fumbles, and 78 combined tackles with 64 solo tackles, and 6 tackles for a loss. All in all, he forced 12 turnovers. He also added 8 pass deflections, averaged 40 yards per interception, and simply put, this year he had more impact plays than most defensive players have in a career. When passing to him, quarterbacks only average a 50 passer rating. The league's average was 80 to 85 that year. He had a 10% interception rate. He was amongst the league leaders in defensive EPA. While the Baltimore Ravens didn't make the playoffs, Ed Reed had elite range, elite ball production, elite return value, and was one of the best hitting safeties in the league that year. He didn't just lead the league in picks, he gave every elite quarterback suppression when throwing over the top, and honestly, he had MVP level impact from the safety position, which we don't see in the modern day ever. So with that being said, my 10th greatest defensive season in NFL history is 2004 Ed Reed. Number 9, 2009 Darrelle Revis. This might be the greatest technical cornerback season of all time. If we're going by technique, if we're going by film, Darrelle Revis might be the greatest corner ever. There's not another corner that's as skilled as Darrelle Revis, and I'd even go Deion Sanders, but there is things about Deion Sanders that does make him better, at least in my opinion. But we aren't talking about Deion. Let's get on 2009 Darrelle Revis. 2009 Darrelle Revis held these wide receivers under 35 yards. This list includes Andre Johnson, Randy Moss twice, Marquise Colston, Terrell Owens twice, Torrey Holt, Steve Smith, Reggie Wade, and Chad Ochocinco. Simply the greatest shutdown quarter season of all time in my opinion. He might be the greatest traveling corner of all time. But now let's get into his stats. In 2009, Darrelle Revis in 16 games had 6 interceptions for 121 return yards, 1 pick six, 31 passes defended, 54 combined tackles, 47 solo tackles, was first team All-Pro, and was robbed of Defensive Player of the Year by Charles Woodson. And Darrelle Revis in this defense would lead the New York Jets all the way to the conference championship, where they would lose to the Indianapolis Colts. But that doesn't take away from Darrelle Revis' elite season. He only allowed 41 receptions, a catch rate of 37%, was targeted 111 times, only allowed approximately 425 yards, that's 3.8 yards per catch, and the league average yards per target was 7.5. When quarterbacks threw the ball to him, they only had a 32.3 passer rating. By the way, spiking the ball every play is 39.6 passer rating. Quarterbacks were just statistically better off just throwing the ball to the ground. He only allowed 2 touchdowns all season while guarding elite competition. He shadowed wide receiver ones almost every game. Opposing quarterbacks often stopped targeting his side entirely, and simply put, you just didn't throw to this guy's side of the field. With that being said, my 9th greatest defensive season of all time is 2009 Darrelle Revis. Number 8, 2001 Michael Strahan. 2001 Michael Strahan is the gold standard for pass rushing season in the NFL, at least up till recently, but we'll get to that season later. He had 22.5 sacks, which is an NFL record at the time, even though technically Mr. I steal money from the homeless and give it to the rich Brett Favre just fell down for him. But anyways, the record still counts. He had 6 forced fumbles, 73 combined tackles, 24 tackles for a loss. He was first team All-Pro and Defensive Player of the Year this season, and this 22.5 sack record stood stood for 25 years, a quarter of a century. This was the best season of his career, point blank period. He had an estimated 90 plus total pressures this year. He had a 25% pass rush win rate compared to league average at the time, which was 15%. He had an approximate value of 22, one of the highest defensive approximate value seasons ever, which just shows he was one of the most valuable defensive players in football history that year. But why Michael Strahan so low, even though he had the sack record for almost a quarter of a century, it's because his win rate isn't as high as the most dominant pass rush seasons, I believe. He had less total pressures than some of the most dominant pass rush seasons. He wasn't as good on the run as the top pass rush seasons, and he didn't have the overall dynamic impact as some of the best pass rush seasons of all time. But this isn't shitting on Michael Strahan. He had an all-time great NFL season, and he had one of the 10 greatest defensive seasons in NFL history, and that's why at number 8, I have 2001 Michael Strahan. Number 7, 1994 Deion Sanders. Now, why I have Deion Sanders over Darrelle Revis? Well, Darrelle Revis is the greatest shutdown corner of all time, and he might be better in man coverage. When it comes to sheer playmaking, Deion Sanders can make better plays than Darrelle Revis, because in the 1994 season, he had 3 defensive touchdowns, 303 interception return yards, which was the most all time until 2004 Ed Reed. He had a punt return touchdown, and he could also take offensive snaps at wide receiver. He scored in multiple ways, he had more interceptions, and he averaged 50.5 yards per interception. That is insane. He shadowed wide receiver ones like Revis, might not have been as dominant, but he allowed very little separation, and he arguably at times was just as good as 09 Revis. He dominated the game in all phases of versatility, and just like Revis where quarterbacks avoided him, quarterbacks would not throw to the side Deion Sanders was on. But if they did, I believe Deion Sanders made him pay at a higher rate than Darrelle Revis. And that high value impact, I think, is greater than just being the greatest shutdown corner of all time. That's just my opinion. Simply put, Revis would shut down your wide receiver one, and Deion Sanders would shut down your wide receiver one and take the game from you. And that's why I believe Deion Sanders in 1994 is better than 09 Revis. Number 6, 2025 Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett this previous season had a historic season, breaking Michael Strahan's quarter of a century record for sacks, having 23 in total in 17 games, having 3 forced fumbles, had 60 combined tackles, 43 solo, was first team All-Pro and Defensive Player of the Year. In my opinion, he was the best player in football this year. He averaged 1 sack every 19 snaps, one of the most efficient pass rushing seasons of all time, more efficient than TJ Watt and Michael Strahan. He had 84 total pressures, first in sacks, top tier in pressures plus hurries. He had 5 sacks in one game, which is a franchise record, 3 sacks a game later in the season. At the end of the season, he had constant double teams, even constant triple teams, which didn't allow him to get the sack record until the last game of the NFL season. He had a pass rush win rate of 30%, which is just all-time elite. Elite edge rushers this season had a pass rush win rate average of 15%. That means Myles Garrett is winning almost 1 out of every 3 rushes. He was also double teamed on 30% of his snaps. Probably the most dynamic pass rusher I've personally ever seen. He's one of the most skillful players in NFL history. He's one of the greatest defensive ends of all time, and I believe when it's said and done, he could be the greatest defensive end of all time. So with all that being said, number 6 is 2025 Myles Garrett. Number 5, 2015 Von Miller. While his regular season wasn't as dominant as the previous people I've mentioned, I still value playoff play a lot, and if you can be dominant and undeniable in the playoffs as a defensive player where the offensive scheme is schemed around you and schemed to stop you, that says something personally to me, because simply put, on the defensive end, it is harder to be dominant and undeniable in the playoffs the same way you've been in the regular season. And guess what? 2015 Von Miller has the greatest defensive postseason in NFL history. In 2015, Von Miller played 16 games, had 4 forced fumbles, had 1 pass defended, had 11 sacks, 35 combined tackles, and 9 tackles for a loss. Had 32 quarterback hits, was amongst the top of the league in pressures, and was first team All-Pro. Now let's get to the playoffs. In his first playoff game in the divisional round, he only had 2 tackles against the Pittsburgh Steelers, but the Denver Broncos would pull off a win 23-16 to advance to the conference championship against the New England Patriots, where they'd win 20-18. Von Miller would have 2.5 sacks, 1 interception, and 5 total tackles. He had constant pressure on Tom Brady, forced mistakes out of him, and he's the biggest reason why they won. And in Super Bowl 50 against the Panthers, Von Miller would continue a streak, having 2.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 6 tackles in a Denver Broncos win against the Carolina Panthers 24-10. This is one of the greatest Super Bowl performances ever. His strip sack to touchdown, game-changing play. Another strip sack late in the game sealed it. He won Super Bowl MVP, and in this postseason run, he had 13 total tackles, 11 solo, 5 sacks, 1 interception, and 2 forced fumbles. Simply put, the greatest postseason by a defensive player ever played. And if you watch my offensive video, you know how much I value playoff play. But granted, like I said earlier, for defensive players, it's hard to make that kind of level of impact on a regular basis in the playoffs, as it is during during the regular season because everybody knows you're coming for them. But if you can, that gets you all the way this high on the list. And that's why the 5th greatest defensive season in NFL history is 2015 Von Miller. Number 4, 2018 Aaron Donald. 2018 Aaron Donald is the most dominant defensive tackle season in NFL history. I think if Patrick Mahomes didn't throw 50 touchdowns this season, he would have won MVP. Simply put, what he did as an interior defensive lineman is just ridiculous. You'll never see this in NFL history again, at least I believe. In 2018, Aaron Donald played 16 games, had 4 forced fumbles, 20.5 sacks as a defensive tackle, 59 combined tackles, 41 solo tackles, and 25 tackles for a loss, with 41 quarterback hits. He was first team All-Pro and Defensive Player of the Year unanimously. He had a 28% pass rush win rate, which is crazy from a defensive tackle if you consider they're getting double teamed almost every play by the guard and center. He had a 70% double team rate. Offenses built entire protections around stopping him, and they still couldn't. For what it's worth, he had a Pro Football Focus grade of 98.4 as well, and there's been no defensive tackle in NFL history that's had a 20 sack season. This is one of the greatest defensive seasons of all time, by one of the 3 greatest defensive players of all time in my opinion. But with that being said, the 4th greatest defensive season in NFL history is 2018 Aaron Donald. Number 3, 1986 Lawrence Taylor. Whoa, old heads. I get that he won MVP. I get he's the last defensive player to win MVP. But does MVP automatically mean you're better than someone who didn't win MVP? That's like saying 2023 Lamar Jackson is better than 2009 Drew Brees. Okay, that discussion's over. Let's get into how great 1986 Lawrence Taylor was. Oh, and by the way, did you know he's a sex offender? In 1986, Lawrence Taylor threw 16 games, forced 2 forced fumbles, had 20.5 sacks, and since combined tackles weren't tracked, tackles for a loss weren't tracked, and basically nothing but sacks were tracked, that's basically fucking it, you feel me, my nigga? He was first team All-Pro, he won MVP, and he won Defensive Player of the Year, making him the second and the last defensive player to win the award. The New York Giants would also win the Super Bowl this year, even though Lawrence Taylor wouldn't have a single sack all postseason. But simply put, this is one of the most dominant seasons of all time. I'm making it fast because there's not too much stats here or advanced metrics to really talk about here. But yes, number 3, 1986 Lawrence Taylor. Number 2, 1987 Reggie White. There's no NFL player in almost NFL history that is greater than 1987 Reggie White, and that includes Lawrence Taylor. This is probably the most efficient pass rushing season of all time. In 1987, Reggie White had 21 sacks in 12 games. He had 80 tackles in 12 games. He averaged 1.7 sack per game. In over a 16 game span, this is a 28 sack season. This is one of the highest sack rates ever recorded. Modern elite pass rushers average 1 sack a game in a good year, and he would have over 100 plus pressures this year, and would have a 25% pass rush win rate. He faced constant double teams, constant chips. He was moved to the defensive tackle position at times, and had an AV of 21 in 12 games, one of the highest per game values ever. And if you take into context, there's fewer pass attempts in the modern day in 1987, more run heavy offense, less spread formation. Simply put, there's fewer opportunities to rush the passer. That makes his sack rate even more insane. Now, like I said with Lawrence Taylor, there's not a lot of advanced stats, as in combined tackles, tackles for a loss. All these stats I said are just assumed, and yes, I did assume Reggie White's and not Lawrence Taylor's, because Reggie White's not a sex offender. But with that being said, the 2nd greatest defensive season in NFL history is 1987 Reggie White. Number 1, 2014 JJ Watt. This is the greatest peak from a defensive player in NFL history. JJ Watt could do everything this season. He was the best pass rusher in the league, had one of the greatest pass rushing seasons of all time. He had the 2nd most tackles for a loss in NFL history, and to go with that, he had the playmaking skills of Deion Sanders this year. We have not seen that kind of performance out of any defensive lineman in NFL history. That's how uncanny this 2014 season was for JJ Watt. In 2014, JJ Watt played 16 games. He had 1 interception for an 80-yard pick six. He had 10 passes defended, which is more than Lawrence Taylor, who played the linebacker position, caused 4 forced fumbles, caused 5 turnovers in total, had 1 fumble return touchdown, had 20.5 sacks, 78 combined tackles, 59 solo tackles, and 29 tackles for a loss, which is the 2nd most in an NFL season. And not to mention, on the offensive side of the football, he would also have 3 receiving touchdowns. That's what I mean when I say he was as dynamic as 1994 Deion Sanders. In total, JJ Watt forced 5 turnovers, had 5 total touchdowns, had 20.5 sacks, and had the record for the most quarterback hits in an NFL season at 51. Had the 2nd most tackles for a loss in NFL history, and had 10 passes defended as a defensive end. No defensive lineman has done more in an NFL season than JJ Watt in 2014. He had one of the highest total pressures ever recorded at 120. He had a pass rush win rate of 30%, which is equivalent to Myles Garrett winning 1 out of every 3 rushes. Pressure rate of 20%. He had a 99 Pro Football Focus grade this year, and he was the closest closest defensive player since Lawrence Taylor to winning the MVP award. Simply put, at all phases of the game of football, JJ Watt dominated, and it's just ridiculous. I don't think another season will come close to this that we'll see in the future. The closest thing I've seen was Myles Garrett, but I don't think it touches 2014 JJ Watt. But with that being said, the greatest defensive season of all time is 2014 JJ Watt. And that's going to be the end of the video, y'all. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think about my list. I'll catch y'all later. Peace.